So today we're going to talk about Microsoft Visual Studio. Once you've opened up the application, you're going to see this screen. You'll see some recent files if you've created anything in the past, and some other options too. But to start creating, we're going to look at File, go to New, and Project. This screen will come up. You're going to want to make sure that you go into Visual Basic, because it's going to default to C#, but we're not using C#. So go to Visual Basic and then Windows Desktop, and then make sure you have Windows Forms application right here highlighted. For your homework assignments, for me, start with your name, underscore, and then whatever the assignment is. So let's say we're doing the calculator assignment. We'll do something along these lines. Click OK. Once the application has been built, it's going to start up right here, and you'll see your forms. And this is where we'll create things. In Visual Basic, it's really nice because we just drop and drag. So you go to your toolbox, and one of the first things I'll do when I'm first working is I'll go ahead and pin it right here, so that way it just stays out. And let's throw a few things out there that we're going to need right off the bat. So I'll start with a label. Text box, another label, text box, and usually a button to execute our program. Might want to resize this. And now we have this little skeleton form here, which is pretty good because this is what we'll need to start our programming. Now, once you've created this, all you need to do is hit F7, and it'll take us directly to where we can start programming. So here's our Form 1, and this is the design view, and this is the coding view. Okay, so you'll notice there's a whole bunch of other components, common controls that we can throw in there, and as the class goes on, we'll use some of these and some of them we won't. But this is most of the time, this is where you're going to want to be. So a few other things you're going to want to know is when you click on your file, you're going to be able to go back and open some of your other projects if you need to. You can also see where things are at. And view is really important because this is where you can quickly go to different windows that you're going to need. For example, the Solution Explorer, you're always going to want to be able to see your Solution Explorer. So let's click on that. And this is going to come up, and pin this if it's not already pinned. And this is going to have your files that go to the solution you created for this application. This is really important. This is going to have any references you might need. It's going to have your form you created and any other forms you might create. But one of the things I want to go over is go ahead and right click on this, and you're going to see Open Folder in File Explorer. This is really important because once you get rolling, you're going to want to know, okay, where are my files actually at? So you click on this, and it's going to open up the directory to where your files are actually kept. So you can see here, all your folders are here. The file that's most important to me is this one right here, the Form VB. This one right here that's highlighted is the one that actually has your source code. That's the file that's most critical. But in actuality, I'm going to want to see all these. So once you go up a directory, you'll see your folder that contains your solution files, and then a .sln. This one is the one you click on to actually execute your folders to open up your solution, and then of course all your solution files are in this folder. If you go up another directory, then you can actually just capture your whole project. So a lot of times, let's say you want to zip something, you're going to go ahead and go here and collect your entire project. So another thing you're going to want to know is also along the same menu is if you right click again on your solution and you go down to add, this is where you'll add a new item. And this happens when we want to add like a new class. So I'll go ahead and click on that. So here we go. We're going to add a new class, and let's say that we were going to add a validation class, which is a really common one. So I want to add a class where I'm going to do all my validation from. And so this is all you do. And now you have a new class here. And you can see on our menu we have Form 1, and then we have our new class that we just created. And now we could create a class that does whatever we want it to do. In this case, it's going to do validation stuff. And so we have our Form 1, which is going to have our code for our form, and then our class. Now going back to our form, when you write code, one of the things I want to talk about is you always compile your code as you write it. So you compile frequently, and that's to make sure that your code's still working, and then you'll always know where you're at. So go right up here where it says the Start button here, you click on that, and if you'll notice down here in the blue it'll say Build Started, and then it'll say Build Succeeded, so you know that's good. And then then the actual form will pop up, and you know that it compiled correctly and that your code works up to this point. And this a process that you're going to want to do frequently just to make sure that everything's working. So I'll go ahead and you click stop, and it'll take you right back to your code so you can continue working again. So another thing that's really important back to this menu here when you do a right click on your solution and back into properties again is you're going to want to make sure that in this compile menu right here that you have option strict off. If this is on, it's going to be really strict with your coding, and then you're going to have to concern yourself with strict coding while trying to learn the programming principles that I'm trying to teach. So I'd rather that you turn it off so we can just concentrate on the programming principles rather than the intricacies of Visual Basic. So these are the settings you're going to want. Option explicit, option strict off is the key one that we want to deal with, and basically these settings right here. At this point, we'll go ahead and close this window, and you're basically ready to start programming at this point. You have your form created, you have your shell here to start coding, and all you need to do is start coding. Now the shortcut key, rather than coming up here and clicking start all the time, is just to hit F5. If you hit F5, it's going to compile, and your code, your form will pop up right away. Shift F7 will take you back to your form design. F7 will take you back to your code. So Shift F7, F7. And that's really all you need to know to get started. We're going to go over more of these options as the class progresses, but for right now, these are the important things that I want you to know about Visual Studio. Okay, well, I hope that was interesting. It's a good little start, and we'll talk later about some variables. So I just want to go over a little bit about Visual Studio. Obviously, this is 2015. We'll be using 17 for the most part. But there's 4 main languages that you can use. One of them is the one we'll be using is Visual Basic. You can also use C#, Visual C++, Visual F#, and a few others. For example, I have R loaded on my machine. In this slide, you can see the .NET Framework stack. And here we have our .NET applications. We'll be using Visual Basic. Visual Basic is compiled, and we have our classes and our common language runtime. And then from there, it goes on to our operating system, which in our case will be Windows 10. In this slide, you can see how Visual Studio.NET compiles and runs. So here we have the Visual Studio.NET, the integrated development environment that we code in. And from there we go into our solutions project where all the source files that were located in the solution directory that I showed you earlier. And then from there we go into the C# compiler, and then to the assembly, the intermediate language, and from here to our common language runtime. In this slide we take a look at how to build, and I went over this when I was demonstrating Visual Studio. For our build command, you can build without running it, and all you have to do is click on the build and right click on the project and solution explorer and select the build command from the shortcut list. And this builds the intermediate language for the project and then saves it as an assembly, but it doesn't actually run the project, which is kind of nice. Most of the time though, I want to build and I want to run, so that's when I hit the F5 button, which I was telling you about earlier. And so that does it for the introduction on Visual Studio part 1. The next time that we meet, we're going to be discussing different variables and different data types for the variables. For example, when we're going to have an integer or a double or a decimal or a string text, and also manipulating them within our application. That's all.